Welcome to the ByteGuard podcast, a frontline in the world of tech. I'm Zaid, a computer science and IT student exploring how technology shapes our lives, from AI and cybersecurity to the latest digital trends. So plug in, stay curious, and let's decode the future, one byte at a time. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of ByteGuard, and today we're going to be looking at what's really behind AI, the invisible power that's behind it, which many people actually don't know about, and I myself didn't know about until a few days ago when I was researching what topic to discuss in this week's podcast. So, when you hear people talk about artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT, Google Gemini, even DeepSeek, you think of data centers, coders, software engineers, all sitting away at the desk in Silicon Valley, designing these AI algorithms, etc. But what if I told you that all of that progress that we've seen isn't actually dependent on them, but it's actually dependent on a company that you've never actually heard of, and it isn't actually very well publicized. It's a company in the Netherlands, in a very small town in the Netherlands as well. And it's become so advanced and so irreplaceable that the powers of the earth, so the governments, are all fighting over this company and trying to keep it hidden. And this company is called ASML. Now, without ASML, OpenAI wouldn't be able to train ChatGPT. Nvidia wouldn't be able to make their powerful GPUs. And even Apple wouldn't be able to design their iPhones, which some of you guys are probably listening to this podcast on. We wouldn't actually have a modern digital world as we see it today. And without this company, ASML, our digital world would most likely collapse, and we wouldn't have all these advancements that we're seeing today. So in today's podcast, I'm going to tell you how this Dutch company has quietly become the most important tech company on the planet, essentially. And we're going to look at how it ties into science, politics, and even the future of AI. So let's start with what ASML actually does. So every AI system, so if your smartphone has facial recognition, or if you're using ChatGPT, all these massive AI models, they all run on these things called chips. And no, not the potato things that you put in the oven. And those chips are made by printing billions of microscopic transistors onto thin slices of silicon, which are funnily called wafers. And again, it's not the biscuit, it's a really thin slice of silicon that probably you wouldn't even be able to notice if you pulled your phone apart. And this printing process is called lithography. And essentially it uses light to etch these really precise patterns onto this thin slice of silicon. So, obviously we know that for chips to be able to work faster, they're made smaller, so they're more efficient. And adding light to the equation just adds to the extremely short wavelength. So, it means that it can draw in extra details and can go into measurements such as nanometers. And you're probably thinking, well, that seems quite impossible, or it seems really hard to do. And this is why ASML exists. So they make machines that use extreme ultraviolet light, also known as EUV. And the light is so powerful that it can essentially burn it. And it can make patterns that are smaller than a human virus. Well, not a human virus, but a virus that affects the human body. And the crazy part about this is that ASML essentially have a monopoly over this. They're the only company in the entire world that actually specialize in this and can actually do it. Now, it's not Intel that we see plastered all over our computer screens. In fact, on my laptop right now, I've got an Intel processor in it. It's not Samsung. And it's not even the big tech companies in countries such as China or India or even the US. It's just one small company in the Netherlands. So, whilst I was doing research on this topic, this EUV technology is being labelled as the most complex machine humanity has ever built. So, an ASML EUV lithography machine, that's a bit of a mouthful, it costs over $150 million. Just one. Each one. Just one machine. And it weighs about 180 tons. So as you can tell, it's a pretty big piece of kit. And when it's transported to different countries, it takes about 3 or 4 Boeing 747s just to transport a single unit of it. And if you have a quick Google of what a Boeing 747 looks like, you'll notice that it's quite a big plane. So each machine contains over 100,000 parts, and they're not just built by one supplier. They're built by approximately 5,000 suppliers around the world. And each different bit of technology is made by a different supplier, all put together to make this one massive $180 million worth of kit. So it has a mirror inside it, and this is made by a German company called Zeiss. I'm not sure if I said it right, but we're just going to go with it. And the mirror has to be so perfect, it has to reach such a perfection that if it was scaled up to the size of, let's say, the entirety of the United States, the tallest bump on that mirror would just be 1 millimeter. That's how precise and thin it has to be. Now, let's take a step back from all of this large language that we've just used. Put your phone flat. If you looked at your phone horizontally whilst it was flat, it would look smoother than glass under a microscope, right? Well, now imagine that, but on an even smaller scale. You can't even see the glass, it's that perfect. That's how well it sits into the machine. And you're probably thinking, is that really manufacturing? Or is that science fiction? Is that stuff that we've seen in movies? Or am I talking about real life? Well, let me tell you, I'm talking about real life, and the science fiction has come to life. So, you're probably wondering, how has ASML become so uncopyable that it's the monopoly? It's running a monopoly of these massive pieces of kit. Well, it's actually not that simple. Like, ASML didn't just start like this. This EUV technology has taken decades to develop. And ASML have actually spent billions upon billions upon billions on research around this area. They worked with scientists, universities, and even physics labs, which I never thought physics would come into the building of AI, but clearly it has. Even the precision NASA used to design their rockets wasn't precise enough. They had to invent entirely new ways to bend and reflect the light on this thin mirror I've just talked about, to make the light behave unlike normal light. They've partnered with thousands of suppliers that all contribute their own small parts to it. And to be able to copy ASML, you'd need all of these 5,000 companies that ASML have used at one time to give you the parts. And you can imagine how expensive that will get. And essentially, you'd be basically trying to make the internet as it is today from scratch, but in a shorter amount of time. And that's why countries like China, even with their massive $1 trillion tech budgets, they're still unable to build to this scale and to this capability. And this is why the EUV technology has remained out of reach from pretty much everyone apart from ASML. So how did ASML start? Well, ASML was never this giant. And it actually started in 1984, and it was originally made to be a little copy of Philips. Do you all remember Philips? I'm not too sure if you see many things around, but I remember I saw a trimmer in the store the other day, which was up for sale by Philips. And obviously Philips is an electronic company. And it started with a small group of engineers, just in a small workshop, just building things, As anyone in the tech space would understand, building things is just really cool. They had no media attention. They were obviously doubted by investors. And the industry they were in thought they were hopeless. And at one point, that they reached a breaking point. They were so broke that they were essentially just wasting time on any precision they could waste time on just to find something to sell, a service to sell. And they just kept going with that. They kept going to finding these niche services, and it led to them essentially building the future of computing. They started shrinking transistors smaller and smaller, and that eventually grew and turned this company that we knew as ASML, that was a struggling startup, into one of the most critical companies in the global economy that we've ever seen. And ASML have not only just built one of these EUV machines, in fact, they've built 140. 140 machines. And just remember that I said one machine costs about $150 million to make. You can just imagine how much money they've raked in. Now, this is where tech becomes political. In 2019, the USA, being the USA, pressured the Dutch government to essentially warn ASML and block it from selling these EUV machines to China. And obviously, as we know, Donald Trump does not like China. America does not like China. Essentially, China isn't a very well-liked country in the world. This pressure meant that the United States essentially can control who can essentially control ASML, which means that if you control ASML, who make the chips, then you own the global chip supply chain, and whoever owns the global chip supply chain essentially controls AI. So, in a shorter way, the US basically own AI. That's how we're thinking of it, because the US can pressure the Dutch government, to stop ASML from selling to certain countries, just like it's done with China. Now, it's quite clear why the US didn't want China to get this access to these big advanced chips. It's purely from a war perspective. They don't want China to have an upper hand. So ASML went from becoming a small startup to a large company to now a weaponized company, and it's only become a strategic asset. It's basically become as important as oil, gas, and nuclear power is to the rest of the world. The governments don't just want their technology, they essentially rely on it and they need it. So, why should ASML matter to you more than you think it does? Well, as we've seen and as I've covered, AI is growing faster than ever. But obviously this isn't just magic, as I've covered today. It's all just coming from powerful hardware that essentially ASML make. So if ASML decided to pack their bags and just stop production tomorrow, our advanced AI chips would stop too. This means there'd be no new advancements in Nvidia GPUs, no new powerful advancements in iPhones, no new powerful advancements in Android phones, and no new AI models. Our progress, such as self-driving cars using AI technology, our progress in quantum computing, our progress in our defense systems, would all collapse. None of it would be there. And it goes as far as to say that our entire modern civilization, involving the internet, AI, and even our healthcare, it all relies on these machines. So, if these machines collapse, we wouldn't have any of it. In fact, even our schools have become so digitalized and so AI dependent that our classroom would struggle to survive. And it's also kind of ironic that the future of humanity itself not only depends on this tech company, but it depends on a tech company using light, using nature. And it reminds us that our system is very fragile. And if something were to happen, just one little natural disaster that could affect ASML systems, a cyber attack, or even, as shown by the USA, political pressure, everyone would feel the effects, and the effects would be massive. ASML isn't just a company, it's actually a single point of failure in our digital world. And as we all know, a single point of failure means that if it crashes, the entire thing that relies on it crashes as well. So, this story about ASML is not just about machines and money, it's actually about focus. While other companies have chased the trends and have publicized their research, ASML have essentially spent 40 years perfecting one thing, which has distracted essentially the consumers by other tech and flashy apps. But they don't know what's in the background. They've become obsessed with precision, and they've pushed physics to its absolute limits, essentially so that the human mind, the normal human mind, that's unaware of this, completely surpasses it. And that's something I find quite interesting, but also a tad scary, because it shows that if a company can hide to this extent and not be exposed in the way that it should be in the mainstream media, then how do we make sure that we're staying safe, and how do we make sure that our futures are still going to be how we imagine them to be, stable. We have a job, or business, we rely on tech even more and more. How do we know that it's going to still be there when we need it, essentially? So now, next time you hear about these big AI breakthroughs, such as a new ChatGPT model like GPT-6, or a new chip that Apple put in their phones, or even a new headline that's saying AI is taking our jobs, just remember this episode, and just remember that there's only one company that's behind it, and that's ASML. And without them, there's no AI. And thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to the ByteCard podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the podcast and share it with someone who loves tech as much as you do. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll catch you in the next one.